December 6, 1917. Halifax, Nova Scotia. 8:40 in the morning. The harbor is already alive. Longshoremen move crates along the piers in the cold Atlantic air. A thin layer of frost still clings to the wooden planks. The smell is salt, coal smoke, and engine grease. Children press their faces against classroom windows on the north end of the city, watching the ships in the Narrows, that slim corridor of water, barely 300 meters wide, where the harbor meets the Bedford Basin. The teacher tells them to sit down. Halifax in 1917 is not a quiet port town. It is the main artery of the Allied war effort in the North Atlantic. Every week, hundreds of ships pass through carrying soldiers, horses, artillery shells, canned food, medicine, everything the trenches of Europe demand and never stop demanding. The city has grown fast, loud, and careless with it. Warehouses packed too close together, populations doubled. Safety rules written for peacetime ignored in war. Nobody has time for that. There is a war on. At 8:40 that morning, two ships are approaching each other in the Narrows. One is the Mont Blanc, a French cargo vessel, 97 meters long, riding low in the water because of what it is carrying. In its holds, 2,300 tons of wet picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, 35 tons of benzol stored in drums on the open deck, and 10 tons of gun cotton. She is, by any technical definition, a floating bomb. She carries no flag or marking to indicate her cargo. She has no escort. She entered Halifax harbor at first light, cleared by port authorities, and is now moving slowly toward the Bedford Basin to join a convoy. The other ship is the Imo, a Norwegian vessel, large and fast, heading the wrong way down the Narrows. There has been a miscommunication, a delay the night before that kept her in port longer than planned, and now she is moving too fast, trying to make up time. The two pilots see each other. They signal. The signals are misread. They signal again. Both ships turn the wrong way at the same moment. At 8:45 in the morning, the Imo's bow cuts into the side of the Mont Blanc. The collision itself is not the explosion. The collision is just metal against metal, a grinding tear, a shudder felt on the nearby piers. People stop and look. Some walk toward the waterfront to get a better view. The Mont Blanc, slightly damaged, begins to drift. Then the benzol drums on deck catch fire. What follows is 18 minutes of burning. 18 minutes in which everything that comes next could have been stopped. The crew of the Mont Blanc know exactly what their ship is carrying. They launch their lifeboats immediately, not to rescue anyone, but to get as far from the ship as possible. They row hard toward the Dartmouth shore, and they do not stop to warn anyone. They speak French. The dockworkers on the pier speak English. The signal flags they could have raised to warn the harbor went unraised. On the pier, the burning ship is a spectacle. A column of black and orange smoke rises above the Narrows, visible across the entire city. Workers stop to watch. Factory whistles are blowing from the fire ship. The Stella Maris, a tug, is trying to get a line on the Mont Blanc to drag her away from the pier. The crew of the Stella Maris do not know what the Mont Blanc is carrying. They are trying to save the dock. In the Richmond neighborhood, on the north slope overlooking the Narrows, families come to their windows. Children who have been kept inside because of the cold press their faces to the glass. It is a bright morning, and the fire is enormous and bright. At the Halifax train station, a telegraph operator named Vincent Coleman is sitting at his desk when a colleague runs in and tells him what the Mont Blanc is carrying. Coleman knows what that means. He knows there is an incoming passenger train from Truro due to arrive in minutes that will pull right up to the waterfront. He sits down at his telegraph key. He could run. He does not run. He types, "Munition ship on fire. Making for Pier 6. Goodbye." He sends it. The train stops 4 miles outside the city. Hundreds of lives saved by a man who stayed at his post because there was no time to do anything else, and he knew it. At 9:04 and 51 seconds, the Mont Blanc reaches the temperature required to detonate her cargo. What happens next is not an explosion in the way that word is commonly understood. It is the single largest man-made explosion in history up to that point. A column of white light replaces the ship. There is no ship anymore, there is only energy, expanding outward at supersonic speed. The pressure wave flattens everything within a radius of half a mile in less time than it takes to blink. Glass across the entire city shatters simultaneously. Windows as far as 80 kilometers away blow inward. The anchor of the Mont Blanc, weighing 500 kilograms, lands 4 kilometers away in the woods on the Dartmouth side. The shockwave moves through the ground as an earthquake. It moves through the water as a tsunami, a wave that pulls back from the harbor floor and crashes over the Richmond waterfront, flooding the burning ruins. In the Richmond neighborhood, every building facing the Narrows collapses. The children at the windows, the ones watching the fire, are struck by thousands of glass fragments moving at the speed of the pressure wave. It is the leading cause of eye injuries that day. Surgeons in Halifax will perform more eye operations in the next 2 weeks than in the entire previous history of the city. 1,600 people die in the first seconds. Another 400 die in the hours that follow, buried in rubble, burned, or pulled into the harbor by the wave. 9,000 are wounded. It is the largest mass casualty event in Canadian history. And then, that night, it snows. A blizzard moves in off the Atlantic, temperature drops below freezing. Survivors trapped under collapsed structures are now also freezing. Rescue teams from across Nova Scotia arrive to find a city that is half rubble and half ice. Hospitals take in casualties until they run out of floor space. Churches, schools, and train cars become field hospitals. Doctors and nurses work through the night by lantern light, performing amputations on kitchen tables. The investigation begins almost immediately, and what it finds does not flatter anyone. The Mont Blanc was carrying her cargo without adequate warning markings. The Emo was moving too fast for the channel. The Port Authority had cleared both ships without coordinating their movements. The pilots had miscommunicated. The crew of the Mont Blanc had escaped without warning the harbor. Every single failure was a human decision, or the absence of one. The captain of the Mont Blanc and his pilot were arrested. The pilot of the Emo was killed in the explosion. Trials began. Convictions were overturned on appeal. In the end, no one went to prison. The legal system concluded that the sequence of errors was so distributed, so collectively produced, that assigning final responsibility to any single person was impossible, which was, in a different sense, precisely the point. The state of Massachusetts sent a train of relief supplies within 24 hours of the explosion. Doctors, nurses, food, building materials, clothing, glass for windows. It was the fastest humanitarian response of any government in the hemisphere. Halifax did not forget. Every year since 1971, the city of Halifax has sent a Christmas tree to the city of Boston. It stands on the Boston Common each December. Most people who see it do not know why it is there. 2,000 people died in Halifax because 2 ships could not communicate across a corridor of water 300 meters wide, in a harbor that everyone knew was operating beyond its limits, carrying cargo that everyone knew was dangerous during a war that everyone knew demanded speed above caution. The knowledge was there. The protocols existed on paper. What did not exist was anyone with the authority and the willingness to say, "Stop, slow down. This is too much in too small a space." Disasters are rarely accidents. They are the final step in a sequence of decisions that each seemed individually reasonable. Halifax is not the story of an explosion. It is the story of everything that made the explosion inevitable before the ships ever entered the Narrows. Vincent Coleman's last message was received. The train stopped. The passengers survived. One man in 18 minutes found the one thing he could still do, and did it completely. That is the only comfort this story offers, and it is not a small one. If you want to understand another moment where a chain of human decisions led to something that history called an accident, don't miss the next one. See you there.